Didn't expect to play this today at locals, but here we are. Hi everyone, VortexTCG here, and today I'm going to be doing something a little bit different. Usually when I go to locals, I'm obviously the one making the decks that I can post to you guys for the channel. But today we're going to be doing something a little bit different. I'm not going to be the one deciding my deck. Bandai themselves are going to decide the deck for me. So you might be thinking, how is Bandai going to decide the deck for us today? Well, I haven't got like a secret contact with them or anything like that. We're going to go to their website because they have deck lists on there that they usually give out to give you an idea of what the new deck is for the upcoming set. Is Bandai actually going to give us good deck lists, or are they just, kind of throwaway? Let's find out. So you might be wondering, how are we going to choose our deck? Because, Bandai's going to pick them, obviously, so how do Bandai pick them? Well, if you look on the Digimon website and the product page for Blast Ace, you might have noticed something that might have given you a bit of an inkling on this. Essentially, this is the promotional website that tells you everything that's happening in Blast Ace. So if we go across, wow, Ace cards. We love Ace cards, don't we? Wow, they're in alt art as well. Who would have guessed? Wow, here are the characters from Digimon Adventure. Don't you like them? Wow, well, hope you like them more. Here's characters from a series you don't really know much about. Wow. And then if we get to 0.5 out of 8, we get to, here are some useful deck recipes. So these are deck lists that have been made by Bandai themselves, kind of to give you a bit of a, head start on your deck building process if you were going to buy BT14. So let's look at a little bit let's look at them a little bit. So there are some stuff that I don't really want to play straight away on this list. So Metal Greymon Ace and Magna Angemon Ace, I'm going to be doing a little bit more in depth with those decks eventually. And quite frankly, I don't think they're interesting, especially like War Grey and Angemon. I think those decks have been shown a lot. And same here with D-Brigade and Lugamon. These decks have got a lot of popularity coming into BT14. Some might say they're the best decks in the format, but I don't really want to showcase them because you can't really change much of the list. I think when I was looking at the Lugamon list, for example, the only thing that I thought was quite interesting was they weren't playing Black Gato, they're playing Black Gato Universe. I don't know why, but that's what they were doing, so I think that's quite interesting. So what that leaves us with is the Lilymon Ace and the Zudomon Ace. Now, I was going to go Lilymon Ace here, but in my opinion, I don't think there's a lot going on here. In fact, I think this deck is pretty much Rosemon, but with new BT14 cards. There isn't really a brand new strategy being made here. It's just upgrades to an existing deck that came out in BT13 with the burst modes. So that left us with Zudomon Ace deck. While Zudomon is a very popular Digimon in current blue decks, mainly stuff like Ulforce, Blue Flare, Mirage Gal, for example, it doesn't really see itself being played, or the deck itself hasn't been played in its own essential deck. So we have stuff like the Gomamon that came out in this set as well, which isn't seeing much play at all. So I thought this one would be quite interesting, and it's kind of a different playstyle to the other ones as well, where we use strip sources essentially to gain advantage. This could be through stunning, but also gaining security attack, or just by reducing blockers and stuff like that. So I think it's quite interesting, and yeah, I think we're going to go with this one in my opinion. So we've got a deck list here, which is pretty good. And so I'm going to be building this to give a bit of more of an overview. I'm going to put the image up now, which shows the whole list. And yeah, let's talk about the deck itself right now. So we're going to start off with the eggs, and that is the 4 Bukamon. This is the new egg from BT14. Essentially gives us jamming if we have a Digimon that has more or equal sources even than your opponent. This also triggers if your opponent has no Digimon on the field because, well, they don't have any sources. So it works out pretty well for our deck. Then we have the 4 Bluekomon from BT5 and the 4 Gomamon promo. These have essentially the exact same thing going for them. When you trash a card from a Digievolution source, you gain a memory. This is good because then we can keep our turn, and they're just pretty nice rookies in this type of deck. The one that is a little bit different, however, is the BT14 Gomamon. This has start of your main phase, get to trash one source from one of your opponent's Digimon, and then this card cannot be blocked for the turn, and then has on opponent's turn inheritable. If this would be destroyed or deleted even, you get to play a Gomamon out back for free. Essentially is more of a sticky card in the deck, making sure that you can go for safe swings essentially. For level 4s, we play 4 Ikakumon. This is from BT14 as well. When Digivolving, get to trash any 2 sources from your opponent's Digimon, and then when attacking, until the end of your opponent's next turn, one of your opponent's Digimon with fewer Digievolution cards than this Digimon can't attack, and this is the same as the inheritable as well. So we're providing some stun, but unfortunately it doesn't stop us from block as well, which kind of feels a bit bad, but it stops them from attacking on the following turn. We then have 4 Paildramon from EX3. This is another one that allows us to trash a source from under when we Digivolve. It also has a unique opponent's turn effect, whereas if they were to Digivolve onto another Digimon that has no source underneath it, it would increase the cost by 1. And to round off the level 4s, we play 3 Kumamon. This is a hybrid, so we can Digivolve it from a Tamer, a blue Tamer specifically. But also when we Digivolve from it, we get to trash 1 Digievolution card from one of your opponent's Digimon. This essentially just allows us to trigger off effects if we need to, but also primarily used to swing for game. Going on to level 5s now, we have Zudomon Ace. This is the key card of the deck, has the normal counter blast Digivolve effect that we know from Ace card at this point, but it also has on play and when Digivolving, trash any 2 Digievolution cards from your opponent's Digimon, and then return one that has no Digievolution sources back to the opponent's hand. This costs 4, so you can do this by not even Digivolving into it, so you can just hard play it and it feels pretty good, but also just having the ability to do it whenever when your opponent swings is also a very nice interruption as well. So this card is pretty good and is clearly the ace card in the deck. We then play 4 Christ Paildramon. This allows us to trash Digievolution cards from all of your opponent's Digimon, and then if your inheritable is if your opponent doesn't have a Digimon that has no Digievolution sources underneath, you gain security attack +1, which means we can get some more aggression from our level 6s. Going into our first level 6, we have Plesiomon. This allows us to trash 3 sources from underneath any of our opponent's Digimon, and then if your opponent has no Digimon with more Digievolution cards than this Digimon, you get to unsuspend this Digimon. To round off the level 6s and the Digimon, we have Azulongmon from BT6. This allows us to trash 1 Digievolution card from all of your opponent's Digimon, and then you gain 1 memory for each opponent's Digimon with no Digievolution card. Cost of Digievolving into this is 5, so it's quite a lot, but hopefully you'll be able to reduce that and gain the memory back from as many cards you trash essentially. And then your turn, for each Digimon with no Digievolution cards your opponent has in play, you gain security attack +1. This essentially just means that you get to OTK your opponent's security in some situations, or get an additional 2 to 3 swings. We then get into the options. We have Wave of Reliability. This allows us to trash any 2 Digievolution cards from our opponent's Digimon. However, if we have Tamer with Joe Kido in its name, you get to choose one of your Digimon and then unsuspend that Digimon. This just means we get to additional swing essentially, but also protect our Digimon if they are, got a Zudomon Ace underneath, so that they don't die to just a normal swing. We then have some Marching Fishes from BT14, 3 of them. This allows us to choose one of our Digimon till the end of your opponent's turn. 3 of your opponent's Digimon with any or fewer Digievolution cards, then that Digimon can't attack or block. This is essentially like a board-wide stun for most decks. Then we have BT14 Jokaido. This allows us to on play trash a Digievolution source from one of your opponent's Digimon, and then your turn, when a Digievolution card from your opponent's Digimon is trashed, by tapping the Tamer, you gain 1 memory. This essentially becomes a 2-cost Tamer most of the time because you're playing this and then gaining the memory back straight away, and that is pretty nice for the deck. To round off the deck, we have 3 Sora and Joe. This allows us to gain 2 memory if your opponent has a Digimon card with no Digievolution sources in play straight away, and then your turn, when one of your blue Digimon would swing, you get to tap this Digimon to then trash 2 sources from a Digimon as well. So that is the deck. Overall, this is kind of a more control deck. This has some good things going for it by the fact that you can trigger off a lot of effects and gain a lot of bonuses, but the problem is that this deck is going to do bad for opponents that know this deck very well, because all they need to do essentially is not promote, because if they don't promote, then we can't gain additional effects from our Joes, like our Wave of Reliability, Zudomon, etc. So a bit worrying in that regard, but yeah, let's go to locals and see how the deck does. Alright, so we are at locals. We've got the deck ready for today. I'm hoping that we at least get 1 win with the deck. If not, I will cry. So let's get straight into the games. Alright, so let's talk about the games. My first round was against my friend Ash, and he was playing some sort of Lilithmon loot/mill deck that played stuff like Ghoulmon and the Growlmon stuff that allows you to mill. So I thought that was quite interesting. Game 1 I bricked, so essentially I didn't have a level 3, so I was hard playing a lot of level 4s early, which allowed me to essentially lose as much pressure as I could. My opponent, on the other hand, had a pretty decent start. They was able to set up and provide a lot of Digimon in the early game, which allowed them to apply a lot of pressure into my security. As I bricked, it felt very, very clear to me that this deck lacked draw options and stuff like the Wanyamon egg or, other draw cards that blue has access to. They're just not in this deck, so half the time you're going to be just essentially top decking for your card per turn. I almost won, however, this game, but unfortunately I was one swing off and the Jack raid at the end put the nail in the coffin, so I lost game 1. So game 2, and I didn't brick. So I did pretty well. I was able to get a couple of draws early, thankfully, because of the level 3 that I had, but I had a lot of answers from my opponent's Digimon, mainly the Zudomon Ace, because that essentially means that it goes back to their hand and it slows them down. By using the Zudomon Ace and other cards, I was able to control his field, and then I was able to swing full game. Then we get into game 3, and then the opposite happened. I didn't brick this game, my opponent bricked this game instead. With him being able to essentially pass us to 5, I was able to get the deck going, and then actually stunning one of his Digimon with a card in this deck. The Ikakumon actually became quite useful because it allowed him to, me to essentially stun and be protected because he wouldn't be able to attack. And because of the fact that I was able to control any play that he had, essentially, I was able to win game 3 and I won round 1. Anyways, let's get into the next game, which is going to be something a little bit more difficult. It is going to be my friend Fraser playing Fenrir Lugamon. So game 1 went as expected. Unfortunately, the Fenrir player had pretty much a slow start, so I was able to apply a lot of early pressure by using, the level 4 and the level 5 to, get some security attacks off. But unfortunately, the security checks were bad, so it ended up working in my opponent's favor. And pretty much as soon as my opponent was able to set up, the game was over. I couldn't really do anything to counterplay it. He was able to essentially go into his big board and then swing for game. And so then we get into game 2, and this one was a bit similar, but there were some differences here as well. My opponent, again, still has a pretty slow start for the Fenrir Lugamon player, so I was able to apply a lot of pressure early game, but not as much early game pressure as I did in the previous game. One of the cool things that actually happened in this game was that Marching Fishes actually became a pretty good card against this strategy. I hit it in security, which allows me to essentially stun the Fenrir Lugamon from doing its OTK turn, which was quite huge. But unfortunately, even though I was able to stun for essentially 2 turns, I was still not able to apply enough pressure to win the game, so the Fenrir Lugamon player won the round. We then go into game 3, which was going to be against Jesmon. So round 3 was against my friend Chris, who was playing Jesmon, and Jesmon has just got some new buffs coming from the ban list, so I was quite interested to see how this would play out. So essentially, the first round of the game essentially is a little bit lackluster from the Jesmon player. Essentially, wasn't able to get to the pieces they need, and one of the problems that I think that they faced early on was the fact they didn't discard a card to draw 2 from the Systemon Blanc. This would have helped them quite a lot because in future draws, as we would see in the game, they would able to, get a lot more cards that would help them and potentially get into a Jesmon, which could have done huge in a swing for him. So I think there was a couple of misplays from my opponent here, and in the end, he decided not to swing with anything, and then I was able to swing for game. Game 2 goes a little bit differently, however, where my opponent is able to get into a Jesmon early and also provide a bunch of Systemons as well, so he's able to get some follow-up essentially. But with my deck, I'm able to essentially, stun their board out, which is quite nice. One of the things that worked out pretty well in my favor was the Plesiomon. This is the first time I was able to actually go into the Plesiomon all tournament, and this card did work. It allowed me to trash all the sources underneath the Jesmon and then swing and then unsuspend again because of the Sora and Joe. So I was able to get a lot of pressure, and with the Christ Paildramon, I was swinging 2 checks for every swing. So I think in just 1 turn, I was able to get through all of the security, but my opponent had a backup plan. He was able to go into more Blancs, which allowed him to block the field. Ended up the field with 3 blockers, but I was then able to get into that, completely destroy all the blockers on the field and swing for game. So, what did I learn about this Bandai Zudomon Ace deck? Well, what I learned is that there is a core concept with this deck that just doesn't really work. Stripping sources sometimes works when your opponent doesn't understand how that game mechanic works, essentially, but in BT14, it just feels like it's very lackluster, and the stuff that you get from it, the rewards that you get for stripping sources, feels very mediocre at best, such as the Ikakumon stopping your opponent from attacking. Who cares? The Marching Fish is stopping other things from attacking. Who cares? If there was more of a payoff for this strategy, I could see it still working in BT14, but gaining a memory and stopping things from attacking is just not enough in this day and age. What does actually work, though, is the Zudomon Ace. Zudomon Ace carried me through this tournament, if I'm being perfectly honest. The ability to trash 2 sources and then bounce any card that doesn't have sources underneath it was huge. It allowed me to control the field, get rid of their big threats. While they were still getting it in their hand, it still made them essentially a turn behind, so it felt like I got a lot of benefits from actually playing Zudomon Ace compared to the other ones. One of the problematic things that I have with this deck is that there's just very little draw power. Unfortunately, in this deck list, they don't ask for like training cards or the blue memory boosts or anything like that. So it just feels like when you get your opening hand, good luck getting additional draws unless you're very lucky and able to build stacks and then get the draw from the stacks. But that's all you're going to be essentially relying on. I think average per turn, I was able to draw 1 extra card, except for the draw for turn. It felt very, very off compared to other meta decks that you could be playing. So yeah, definitely something that you should keep your eye on, because that really did affect my gameplay in this tournament. I think overall there are just some really questionable cards in this deck. I don't know why they're playing Pale Dramon from EX3. It might look good on paper, increasing their Digi-Evolution costs, but in reality it does nothing. It just feels like a wasted slot, and there's a lot of cards like that as well. But there were some nice cards in this strategy as well that I might actually consider playing in other strategies coming forward. Waves of Reliability. If you're playing Joe Kaido in your deck, I feel like Waves of Reliability is a really nice tool that allows you to strip sources but also unsuspend your Digimon, and sometimes you just need that extra push for game, so it's actually got me considering cards like those in future decks. But overall, I think that this deck is bad. I really do. I think I really took advantage of the fact that my opponents were also bricking, unfortunately, so I was able to get a couple of wins there. But as soon as I went against a competitive tier 1 deck in Fenrir-Lugamon, you saw the strategy essentially go completely. While I was able to hang in for a little bit, I couldn't hang in enough, and so in my opinion, don't play this deck, avoid it. And when you're looking at these decks that Bandai provide you, maybe consider changing them up a little bit. There's some cards that you can definitely use to upgrade this strategy, which will make it a lot more better. But overall, would I recommend it? No, you definitely shouldn't be playing this at all. What are your thoughts on the Zudomon Ace deck here? Do you like it? Do you think you're going to use it in future tournaments, I guess? Let me know in the comment section down below. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video.